Have you ever wondered if a simple broadcast on TV could be God's answer to someone who is about to give up everything? Have you ever imagined that an old message coming from a Billy Graham crusade could interrupt the exact moment when someone decided to end their own life? Because that's exactly what happened. He had already written the farewell letter. The words were there, blurred by the tears that kept falling. Inside that dark room, silence screamed. The world outside continued its course, but inside, time seemed to have stopped. He was alone with his thoughts, wallowing in guilt, without purpose, trapped in a pain that seemed to have no end. And it was in this silent abyss, where no one seemed to hear, that something inexplicable happened. The TV, which had been turned off for days, turned on by itself. The screen glowed, cutting through the darkness like a light from above, and the first voice that echoed in that dark environment was that of Billy Graham. God has not forgotten you. Those words pierced his soul as if they were aimed exactly at him. It was as if God himself had invaded that room, reaching across time, using a forgotten recording to deliver a living message. He didn't know whether to cry or believe, but something changed in that instant. The pain was still there, but there was a spark, a doubt that sounded like hope. What if I still have a purpose? This is not just another video. This is a calling, a warning for those who feel tired, for those who no longer see a way out, for those who thought that God had remained silent. Billy Graham may be gone, but his words remain instruments of salvation, used by God to reach those on the edge. And if you're watching this right now, maybe this story isn't just about him. Maybe it's about you too. And if you've made it this far, perhaps this message didn't appear in your feed by chance. Maybe this is one of those moments when God interrupts the routine, breaks the silence and whispers, "I'm still here." And if all of this is happening now, it's because he wants you to know you are not alone. If you are facing something similar, if discouragement, pain, confusion, guilt, or even thoughts of giving up have tried to silence your hope, leave a prayer request in the comments. Write what's on your heart, or simply comment on the word life. We read everything, and yes, we pray for each person who comments here. Because this channel is not just a place for videos, it is a space for encounters with God, with purpose, with a new chance. You don't need to understand everything now. You just need to take one step. And maybe this step is as simple as clicking the like, subscribe to this channel, and comment on your pain, your cry, or your search. This is not about engagement. This is about connection. Every comment is like a candle burning in the dark, and when several light up, the darkness no longer has the same strength. God continues to use testimonies. He continues to use the voices of men like Billy Graham, even decades later, to reach people just like you. And perhaps soon, your testimony will also be here. Why no one is beyond the reach of grace, neither do you. Now keep watching, because this story is just beginning. He was like many today, tired of pretending everything was fine. On the outside, work, bills paid, presents at family lunches, empty smiles for photos on social media. Inside, silent screams, sleepless nights, an emptiness that seemed to swallow everything. Routine was the perfect disguise. Wake up, leave, come back, sleep, and repeat. But none of these actions were live. He breathed, but did not live. He walked among people, but he felt invisible. The heart screamed for a meaning, a direction, a sign that its existence was not just a cosmic error waiting to disappear without leaving a mark. And this feeling, this hole inside the soul, didn't come overnight. He grew over time. It was formed amidst disappointments, behind closed doors, through prayers that he thought were never heard. And the worst of all, that's what he believed. At some point in his life, he had faith. I had heard about God, about Jesus, about miracles. I even vaguely remembered hearing the voice of Billy Graham as a child at her grandmother's house, while she prayed quietly with her hand over the TV. But this felt like part of a life he no longer belonged to. Now, it was just him and the silence. He is to blame. He had the feeling of carrying something that no one could see, that no one could reach. Maybe it was depression. Maybe it was tiredness of the soul. Maybe it was the sum of all the no's he received in life. Or maybe it was all of that together. and a little more. The point is that he saw no way out. I didn't see a cure. And that's when he decided to write that letter. Every word of that farewell was written with tears and weight. It wasn't anger. It was exhaustion. It was the certainty that no one would miss it, that the world would follow, that his absence would not cause any noise. But he was wrong, extremely wrong, because it was precisely at that moment that the unexpected happened. That old TV, which didn't even work properly, turned on by itself, and the blurred image gave way to something he hadn't seen in years. A familiar face, a scenario that seemed like decades ago. And then, the voice. That unmistakable voice, full of authority, but at the same time so welcoming, was Billy Graham. And he said, with a conviction that crossed time and space, God is still calling you. You are not alone. There is a purpose for your pain. That wasn't just a sound. It was a punch in the chest. It was as if someone had pulled the air back into his lungs. As if the soul, asleep for so long, had received a shock. He couldn't explain it. And he didn't even try. Because in that moment, for the first time in months, maybe years, he felt something. Something true. Something real. As if that phrase had been saved just for him, waiting for the exact moment when the darkness was strong enough so that the light could shine brighter. He remained sitting, motionless, staring at that screen. The tears started to fall again, but this time, it wasn't from pain. They were confrontational, of brokenness. Because there, in that silent room, he didn't just hear preaching. He heard a call, not from a pastor, but from a God who refuses to give up on his children. And Billy Graham, even decades later, even remotely, even through a forgotten recording, it was his mouth at that moment. And that's why this video is here now. Because maybe this story seems distant, like something that happened to someone else, in another place. But what if it isn't? What if, like him, you also need a sign? What if this is the way God found to reach you today? You who perhaps have a heavy soul, with tired faith, with hope fragmented into pieces that are difficult to put together. You who ever thought that no one would understand what you feel, that you may have even written your own letter, even if only in your mind. The truth is that there are moments in life when the sky seems distant, prayers seem to hit the ceiling, and everything seems too dark to continue. But it is precisely in these moments that God moves most. That's when he interrupts the pattern, invades the routine, and acts in ways that defy logic. He speaks wherever he wants, sometimes through a song, a phrase, an unexpected encounter, or through an old preaching by a man who, even after leaving, is still used as a living instrument of transformation. Billy Graham. I have always said that God loves each human being with a personal and eternal love. And it is this love that is trying to reach you now. Not by chance, not by algorithm, but by divine intention. Because you matter. Your life matters. Your pain is not invisible to God. And even if you don't understand everything right now, there is a silent invitation being made within your heart. If you feel that this story spoke to you in some way, write here in the comments. It could be a word, it could be a sentence, it could just be, I'm here. Write called if you feel that God is awakening you today. Comment life if you want to start over. Or just say, pray for me, because yes, we will pray, in truth. This channel is a space for testimonies, but it is also a space for intercession. Each comment is read carefully, and every person who opens their heart here is no longer alone. That night, alone, he heard a voice that said, God has not forgotten you, was Billy Graham. It was as if it were just for him. It wasn't just a sentence. It was a calling, a helping hand. It was as if someone had reached through the curtain of time and spoken directly to his soul. That old voice, with a soft accent but firm as a rock, sounded more present than anyone else in the last years of his life. For a moment, he was still. The letter was still there, crumpled in his hand. The pain was still there too, but there was something different. An eerie silence took over the room, as if time had stopped. He didn't really understand, but something inside him breathed. He continued watching, even without knowing why. Maybe it was the fear of shutting down and everything hurting again. Maybe it was the hope of hearing something more. The message of Billy Graham in that video, it was about purpose, about forgiveness, about fresh start. It was not a word for religious people, it was a word for broken, for exhausted, for those who were about to give up, like him. Billy spoke with chest-thumping conviction, as if he knew exactly what he was going through. You may think that God has forgotten about you, but he never stopped looking at your life. Those words hit like thunder inside him. It couldn't be a coincidence. Not at that time. Not like that. He saw himself there, in the stories that were told in the video. People who were on the edge of the abyss, like him. People who had lost everything, who had failed, who thought God no longer cared. But every one of those people had been reached. By grace, by the voice of God. Many of them precisely through a message from Billy Graham. The pattern repeated itself. Pain, collapse, divine intervention, transformation. It was impossible to ignore. Something inside him began to break. A cry began to rise from his throat. But it wasn't the same crying as before. It wasn't a cry at the end. It was at the beginning. Delivery of surrender. He was not a religious person. He never attended church. He grew up hearing about God, but became distant over time. Life was pushing him away. One mistake after another. One loss after another. Until faith became just a memory. A distant echo of something he may never have truly experienced. But there, in front of that TV, with that old sermon echoing around the room, he felt for the first time in a long time that God still wanted him back. And not only that, I wanted to cure him, restore it, use it. The message hit home. Billy talked about forgiveness as if it were something simple. You don't need to understand everything now. You just need to believe. You just need to surrender. God does the rest. That dismantled what little was still standing inside him. He didn't know how to pray. I didn't know what words to use, but he closed his eyes. He let the tears flow. And silently, with his heart screaming, he said something like, "If this is real, if the Lord is still listening to me, then show me. Get me out of here." And it was there, at that moment, that something changed. It wasn't magic. It wasn't cinematic. The room didn't shine. The ground didn't shake. But he felt peace, a peace he hadn't felt in years. The mind was still confused. The body was still tired. But the soul seemed to have been touched. God's presence is not always noisy. Sometimes it's as subtle as a whisper. And in that whisper, he understood that there was still time, that there was still a way. That night didn't have to be the end. He got up. He walked to the kitchen. He drank a glass of water. He took a deep breath. He didn't know what to do from now on, but he knew he wasn't going to end his life that day. And all this because of an old video, a message preached decades ago by a man he didn't even know. But that, in some inexplicable way, seemed to have spoken exactly to him. How if Billy Graham was there, in that room, at that moment, as if the voice of God had used that recording to say, "There's still time. I'm still here." The next morning, he didn't wake up transformed. He didn't wake up ready to change the world, but he woke up alive, and with something I hadn't felt in a long time, hope. He spent the day in silence, thinking, watched more videos, researched more about Billy Graham. He read comments from others who had also been touched by similar messages, and that's when he realized he wasn't the only one. So many people, spread across the world, telling similar stories. Moments of despair interrupted by simple, direct words, full of anointing. People who had come back to life, who had found meaning, who had been saved through ancient preaching. That is the power of a true testimony. He crosses distances, tears down walls, breaks resistance. What happened to him wasn't just an emotional coincidence. It was a date, one of those encounters that cannot be explained logically, that don't fit into a rational script. But they make sense deep down in the soul. A meeting with purpose, with grace, with the God who still speaks, and who often chooses to speak through voices that are no longer here, but that still echo for generations. Now, if you are here, watching this video up to this point, it is because something inside you has also been touched. Maybe you didn't write a letter like he did. Maybe you haven't thought about giving up yet. But maybe you are tired, lost, feeling distant from God. Or maybe you think he no longer cares. If that's the case, let me tell you something with all love and respect. God has not forgotten you. If He allowed you to hear these words today, it is because He still has plans for your life. And even if you don't understand everything now, keep going. Stay here. There's more coming. God is still speaking. And maybe the next sentence that will touch your heart is already seconds away. If you felt that this message reached you, comment below. It can be a sentence, a word, or just, "I am here." But if you want something specific, comment, "God spoke to me," or "I need an answer too," or simply, "Billy Graham still talks." Every comment here is an echo of this voice that is still alive, and we will pray for you. Read what you wrote, and hold your hand, even if virtually, at this moment, because no one should go through pain alone, and you are no longer alone, never was, and now, something even bigger is coming. He turned off the TV, but it wasn't the same anymore. He threw away the letter. He called his mother, and for the first time in years, he cried. He actually cried. It wasn't a cry of pain like the others he hid under his pillow on the quietest of mornings. It was a cry of relief, of someone who had found a thread of life where before there was only darkness. The message of Billy Graham, it still echoed in his mind like a melody that refused to fade away. Those words, spoken with so much authority and tenderness, had touched a place he didn't even know still existed inside him. A forgotten, abandoned place, suffocated by years of disappointments, silent addictions, disguised loneliness, and unanswered prayers. In that instant, he understood that it wasn't just him fighting the pain. It was as if there was an invisible crowd, people like him, who every day fought internal battles that no one saw, and that there, in that message, was something deeper than comfort. There was a call to transformation, not a religious call, stuck in dogmas, but a living, spiritual call, direct to the tired spirit that just wanted peace, real peace. And he wanted that more than anything, more than a better job, more than any outward cure. He wanted peace within himself. I wanted to wake up and feel like life could still be worth living. I wanted to look in the mirror and not just see a burden, but someone loved, someone with purpose. In the days that followed, he watched the video again. Not once, not twice, but several times. Every time, he felt weak. He pressed play again, and in some mysterious way, that message seemed new each time. The same phrases gained new meanings. The same voice as Billy Graham, even ancient, even distant, was still alive. Because it wasn't just a man's voice. It was as if God himself was speaking through him. And the more he listened, the more the layers of pain were peeled away. It was as if each word spoken unraveled an internal knot. As if each testimony told in the videos was further proof that he was not alone, that her pain was not unique, that there were others, and that everyone was being reached. He started reading the Bible, even though he didn't really understand it. He started looking for phrases that sounded like what he heard from Billy. Verses about purpose, about forgiveness, about starting over. And he started writing in an old notebook that he found at the bottom of the drawer. They were not beautiful prayers, nor well-structured texts. They were soul fragments. Words like, "Help me, don't let me go back, talk to me today too." And it was there that he began to realize something even deeper. God wasn't just trying to save him from death. God was calling him back to life, for a life with meaning, a life with direction, a life where your story, no matter how messed up, could still be used. A few days later, he had an impulse. He shared that Billy Graham video with a friend who was also strange, silent, distant. He just sent it with a simple message: "Watch until the end." That's what held me back, and I didn't expect an answer. But the next day, the friend sent an audio crying, saying, "Bro, I was thinking about doing something stupid, but this message seems like it was meant for me." And it was at that moment that he understood that it wasn't just for him. What he had experienced was not an accident. It was part of something bigger, a purpose deeper than he imagined. He began to delve into the testimonies. Every story he saw, every video he found with reports of transformation through Billy Graham's messages seemed to reinforce what he was experiencing. It was like an invisible thread connecting broken lives by the same call, a call that spanned decades, that did not depend on the time or geography. It was as if Billy's voice had been sealed with a mission to reach the last, the rejected, the exhausted, those the world had already given up on. And among these, he was also being reached. But there were difficult days. There were times when the darkness tried to return, when the routine got tough, when bad thoughts tried to invade again. And it was at these times that he remembered one of the strongest phrases he heard: "You don't have to be strong to be reached by God. You just have to be willing to listen." And he listened. Even weak, even afraid, he listened. And every time I did that, something was renewed, as if the sky embraced him, even without him seeing it, as if faith were made exactly for those who no longer have strength, but still have a thread of hope. Even if this thread came through a video, for an old message, for a transmission that, in the eyes of the world, was already outdated, but which, in the kingdom of God, was still alive. And that's why he still watches, still looking, still share, because he understood that testimonies are not just stories, they are seeds. And sometimes, all someone needs to not give up is knowing that someone else has been in the same place and gotten out of there. It was transformed. It was rescued. She was called back. And maybe you're hearing this now and thinking it's a coincidence. That video appeared in your feed because the YouTube algorithm knows you. But is it really? Or could it be that, like him, you are also being interrupted by something bigger, for a voice that still speaks, for a God who still saves, for a message that still carries the power to transform lives? If this is speaking to you, save this moment. It doesn't go unnoticed. And when you finish watching, right below, leave a sign. It could be a prayer request. Could be the word life if you need to start over. Could it be God spoken to me if something touched your heart? Or even a simple, "I am here," just so we know that you were reached. Because this space is not just about videos. It is a place of living testimonies. And yours may be starting now. What if this story is a sign for you too? What if this message is the answer you've been asking for? Not just a strange coincidence, not just a video that appeared in your feed by chance, but a calling. A clear, direct, and loving attempt by God to reach what is still inside, hidden among the pain, the silences, the tiredness, and that desire to give up that no one notices. Maybe it's exactly that, a spiritual sign, the kind that only makes sense to those who have already prayed in silence asking for an answer, for those who have cried without saying a word, waiting for God to read between the tears. And if so, if this story, so similar to yours, has crossed your path now, why are you at the exact point where you need to be reminded that God is still listening? Because sometimes we don't need much. Sometimes the soul doesn't want an explanation, a visible miracle, an immediate turnaround. She just wants to hear it again. You are not alone. And that's what this message carries. This story of someone who was on the verge of everything ending, but who was reached by the voice of Billy Graham, is a living reminder that God still speaks, that he uses the unlikely, that he enters where no one enters, that he answers even when we had already given up asking. Maybe you're watching and feeling exactly that feeling in your chest that it's not just a video, that there is something different about this content, that this voice, this atmosphere, this presence, there is something that you can't explain, but you feel it. This happens when God is near, when he is trying to touch the invisible within us. Because faith, contrary to what many people think, is not just made up of certainties. It is born in the midst of doubt. It blooms in the midst of pain, and it grows stronger when you decide to keep listening, even when you don't understand everything. What if now, at this very moment, you are being visited by that faith again? That faith you had when you were a child. That faith that was once stronger, but was swallowed up by routine, tragedies, losses and silences that were too long. It is exactly in this space where everything seems dry that God likes to make life sprout, because he does not come to those who think they are strong. He comes to those who admit they are weak. And maybe this message is coming to you now because there is a silent scream inside you that only heaven has heard. A scream you never said out loud. A help disguised as normality. A longing for God that you didn't have the courage to admit, not even to yourself. But it's there. And when you hear stories like this, of transformation, of real testimony, of deep spiritual encounters with the voice of Billy Graham, something inside you wakes up. Something moves. And it's not a cheap thrill. It is the Spirit of God trying to tell you there's still time. It's just that God's love is not a pretty speech. It is a force that crosses time, crosses logic, crosses the wrong decisions and the crooked paths that we have already taken. And even if you've distanced yourself, even if you've done things you're not proud of, even if you think you're too dirty to be touched, He still reaches out. This is not religion. That's grace. It's mercy. It's the kind of thing that Billy Graham preached so clearly, so firmly, that it still reverberates in the souls of those who listen. And it's not for nothing. The power of these messages lies not in eloquence, but in the spiritual truth they carry. How many times have you felt like you were about to fall apart and no one noticed? How many times have you wanted to scream, but you swallowed your tears and put on a smile so as not to worry anyone? Maybe you are experiencing exactly this right now, this internal war, this fear of looking inside and not liking what you see. But still, you are here, attending, listening. Perhaps for the first time in a long time, you are allowing yourself to feel something different. A spark, a whisper that says, it doesn't end here. And that's what this video did. Remind you that, even at the bottom of the well, there is an invisible rope being released. And this rope is called hope. Living hope. Real hope. Hope that, even when everything seems lost, still resists. You didn't get here for nothing. The type of content you are consuming now is not one of those that we watch just to watch. This channel is not entertainment. It's confrontation. It's called. It's rescue. And if this is touching you, don't ignore it. Allow yourself to live this moment as something spiritual. Don't rationalize everything. Sometimes, God speaks exactly when we stop trying to understand and just listen. When we don't analyze, we just surrender. And perhaps today is your moment of surrender. Not in the sense of weakness, but in the sense of saying, I'm done trying alone. And as you keep listening, maybe something is squeezing you inside. A weight in the chest, a lump in the throat, or even unexplained tears. This is normal. In fact, this is more than normal. It is a sign that the Spirit of God is touching you. Because when He starts to act, the first thing He breaks are defenses. Those walls you built to protect yourself from pain also prevented you from receiving comfort. And God wants to overturn that. He wants to get in. He wants to talk. He wants to heal. He wants to restore what you don't even have the courage to ask for. If you've come this far, it's because something really touched you. And that's no small feat. It's a clear sign that this message has spoken to you, perhaps like nothing else has spoken to you in recent times. So if this tugs at your heartstrings, don't leave here without subscribing to the channel. Here, you will find more than videos. You will find living testimonies, awakening messages, and stories that God continues to use to reach people like you. And look, if that word confronted you, strengthened you, or even made you cry, leave your like right now. This isn't just to help the channel. It's a way of saying, that message spoke to me. And do yourself a favor. Comment the sentence below, God spoke to me today. This will mark this moment, and it will also show that you are not alone. There are many people going through similar things. You can even come back here later and reread your own comment. Remember this night, this video, this turn of events. Oh, and it doesn't stop here. There is an upcoming video now appearing on your screen. Click on it, because if this story spoke to you, the next one might be even more like yours. And who knows, it will be there that God will continue what He started in your heart today. Go there. I'll see you in the next one.